Good morning, All Souls Community Church. It's Monday, May 25th. Happy Memorial Day for those of you who served our country and that have not just given us a day off, but a life of freedom. Thank you for that. And for those families who are mourning, those who paid the ultimate price, we mourn with you, and we are so grateful for your sacrifice that has given us the privilege of life in this world, in this country, in the way that we have it. Friends, this week we are leaning into this whole concept of God's crazy commands. What happens when God tells us to live in a certain way that just seems nuts at the front end, and until we begin to live into it and see it actually take shape, it just seems like, really, God, that's what you want me to do? And yesterday, Sunday, we leaned into the story of Joshua and the story of the conquest of Jericho, this walled city that God said, here's how I'm going to give you the victory. I want you to march around the city for 6 days, once a day, blowing trumpets. Then on the 7th day, march around 7 times, and then blow the trumpets and yell, and the walls are going to tumble down. And for anyone in the right mind, you should be thinking, what on earth? Like, that's not going to work. You want us to just be yelling and blowing trumpets, and yet it's exactly what happened. It's exactly how it happened, because of the God who has incredibly crazy commands and has even crazier purposes in those commands. And what we're going to see all week long is how the one purpose that unites all of these stories is simply this: that God wants us to know him and trust him. And that even on the front end, when it seems crazy, he wants us to trust in his good purposes that are better than what we thought. And today I want to back the story up a little bit. Before the people of Israel got to Jericho, they needed to cross the Jordan River, which at this time was harvest time, so it was flooded. There was no way that tens of thousands of people were going to be able to make it across the river safely. And so God says to Joshua, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have the priests take the Ark of the Covenant, which was the house, in other words, this little box that God, the Spirit of God, lived in. That he said, I'm going to make my physical presence on earth in that box, this Ark. I want you to take the Ark and go before my people. Let the priests go, and as soon as the priests get in the water, as soon as the soles of their feet touch the water, all of them, the water is going to stop, so that my people can cross on dry land. And right away, Joshua would have known. He would have thought right away, oh, I've done this before. I've seen this before. I was there when you told Moses to simply raise his staff and to raise his hands, and you were going to part the Red Sea, and you did, and your people crossed on dry land. You're going to repeat that miracle here now with the Jordan River? Yeah, that's exactly what God was going to do. But with this specific purpose, I think maybe even a little bit more unique than the crossing of the Red Sea, specific to where Joshua and God's people were. What God was communicating was that there's a flood ahead of them, an impassable river. And that the only way they were going to get across is if God went in first and made a way. Did you hear that? If God went in first, God wasn't asking them to do something that he wasn't going to do for them, with them, and be for them. If he went in first and made a way. And what a beautiful picture of what God would ultimately do through his son, Jesus. And on Memorial Day, when we stop and think and slow down, and we're grateful for all those who've laid down their lives for us to give us the freedom that we enjoy today. What better day for us to stop and give thanks to Jesus for what he's done. For, remember, in the ancient culture, water, the sea, was a picture of death because of all of the sea creatures and the monsters and the uncontrollable power of the water. And so to cross through the sea on dry land was a picture of crossing through death without getting wet. Here, God gives them another opportunity to do exactly that. And he says, but here's what's going to happen first. I'm going to go in first, and I'm going to make a way. Who does that sound like? It sounds like our Jesus, who dies on the cross, and though it looks like he loses because he gets his feet wet in the water of death, he overcomes and creates a way through faith in him for all who put their faith in him to come through the other side of that river alive. Alive. Okay, that's the big picture. What's the unique application of that for us today? Well, for those of you who may not know this Jesus, it's an invitation to get to know him, to put your trust in him. For those of us who do know him, and let me speak specifically to us as parents. If you're a parent out there, I want to speak to you specifically right now. But for all of you who aren't parents, who are tempted to stop listening, I want you to know that the principle I'm about to lay out is for you as well. Because you see, as parents with kids in our homes, especially during this quarantine time and even this long weekend where now there's no school, and it's like, what are we supposed to do? We're surrounded by the flood, listen, the flood of my kids' emotions, of their needs, of their struggles. And the temptation in that situation is to escape, to go outside if it's a nice day, to try to minimize, to watch lots of Netflix, to go read a book, whatever it might be. And I want to encourage you to realize that today God is calling you, like every other day, but listen and hear it today. He is calling you to enter into that flood. What it means to be a parent is like a priest, to be those who minister the grace of God, the mercy of God, the love of God on God's behalf to his people, and his people just happen to be related to you in your home. And he wants you to lead the way. He wants you to get your feet wet first in the flood that looks like it's going to sweep you away because it's too hard for you to make sense of. It's too close. It's too painful. All those things are true. And if you go in alone, you're in big trouble. But he's not asking you to go in alone. He's asking you to take his presence in with you. Like the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant into the River Jordan and the flood stopped. God's promise is to be the one who stops the floods in our lives, to step into it with us, to be with us when the waters come. Do not fear, for I am with you, are God's words again and again and again. Isaiah 43 is the verse that pops into my head over and over again. Don't be afraid when the flood waters come. Why? Because I'm with you. Because I'm with you. God is the one who's with us in the flood. God is the one who's calling us to cross through that flood and to willingly enter in on behalf of those that he's called us to love. In this case, his children and our children. That's not just true with parents. It's true with siblings, with friends, with neighbors, with cousins, you name it. God wants us to look and see, where's the flood that I'm afraid of? How do I bring him into it? And let me just give you a little hint there. If you're not spending time in quiet, solitude, to hear the instructions of the Lord, to hear his voice, giving you very particular words for your particular situation, you're not going anywhere with him. You're trying to drag him rather than being led by him. Listen, spend the time today. Even though it's a vacation day, don't take a vacation from God. Spend the time and listen. And as you do, and as you take the risk to step into that flood, you know what you're going to find? A miracle. A miracle. The very place you thought you were going to be overwhelmed is precisely where God wants to show up most, and where your kids are going to see. What a God. And what parents. They love me that much. They're willing to step into my mess. Yeah, again and again and again. Get in the flood and bring the presence of the Lord with you. He's already won. He has already won. And he wants you and your family this day to experience more of that freedom, that victory. Let his flag, let his banner fly high over your home today. And have a wonderful Memorial Day. God be with you.